Imagine walking into a dusty, candlelit room in 1790. You aren't meeting a clerk, you're standing face to face with Thomas Jefferson himself. He's the Secretary of State, and he's currently acting as the world's most elite Shark Tank judge. Beside him are Henry Knox and Edmund Randolph. These three men are the original patent board, and they are skeptical of everything. They don't want your ideas. They want to see blood, sweat, and a working miniature model. Back then, if you couldn't build a tiny version of your invention that actually worked, Jefferson would point to the door and tell you to get lost. There was no Silicon Valley back then. There was only the raw, grit and dirt reality of a new country that was literally falling apart because they didn't have enough stuff. The very first patent ever issued to Samuel Hopkins for potash sounds like a snooze fest, right? But wait until you hear the stakes. In the 1790s, potash was the black gold of the era. It was used to make soap, glass, and gunpowder. If you didn't have potash, you were dirty, you couldn't see out of windows, and you couldn't fight a war. Hopkins figured out a way to burn wood into ash so efficiently that it basically turned garbage into money. He didn't just invent a chemical process, he invented the American export economy. This one boring patent for burnt wood ashes was the spark that told the rest of the world, hey, America is open for business, and we are smarter than you think. But the real masala starts when we talk about the nail wars. You have to understand that in the 1700s, nails were so precious that people would actually burn down their own houses when they moved, just to sift through the ashes and get the hand-forged nails back. It sounds insane, but it's true. A single house required thousands of nails, and every single one had to be hammered by a blacksmith. It was the ultimate bottleneck. Then came the inventors of the first 50 patents. Men like Jacob Perkins and Josiah Pearson weren't just making tools. They were trying to break the monopoly of the blacksmith. They were obsessed with cold-cutting iron. They wanted machines that could bite through metal like a shark. These guys were suing each other, hiding their blueprints, and racing to the patent office to claim the nail machine throne. These weren't just boring bits of metal. They were the Lego bricks that allowed people to build the Wild West. Without these patent seekers, the American frontier would have stayed a forest forever. Then there's Oliver Evans, the guy who was basically the Elon Musk of the 18th century. He filed patent number 3 for a flour mill. Now, you might think, oh great, flour, how exciting. But Evans was a mad scientist. He created a system where grain entered a building and came out as flour without a single human hand touching it. In 1790, this was terrifying. People thought it was supernatural. He used conveyors, elevators, and descenders to automate the whole process. He was inventing the assembly line 100 years before Henry Ford was even born. But the public hated him. They didn't want automated bread. They wanted the old-fashioned way. Evans spent his whole life fighting for his ideas, proving that the first 50 patents weren't just about things. They were about the struggle to convince the world that the future was coming. As you look through the rest of the boring 50, you see things like better ways to make candles, new methods of distilling spirits, and improved bricks. On paper, it looks like a hardware store catalog. But in reality, it was a revolution. Each patent was a solution to a life or death problem. If your candle didn't burn long enough, you lived in darkness. If your bricks weren't strong, your house collapsed in the winter. If your plow didn't cut the soil, your family starved. The men behind these 50 patents were the original rebels. They were taking the boring parts of life, the dirt, the wood, the iron, and turning them into a superpower. They turned a colony into a titan, one nail, one brick, and